Hello, everyone. Oh, that was awesome. Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome. Please take a seat. And I encourage you to sit closer to us so that we don't feel lonely up here.
I am also lonely.
My name is Elana Redfield. I am the LGBTQI Director, or Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Questioning, Intersex Affairs Director at the Department of Social Services. I work with HRA and DHS. What's HRA? Do you know who knows what HRA is? Human Resources Administration. HRA administers, oversees a lot of the public benefits programs in New York, and Department of Homeless Services, DHS, oversees emergency temporary shelter. So we have an awesome panel here. I have a couple questions for you. So how many people came last year and came to the TGNC panel or the discussion around transgender issues? A couple people, okay. So today, this conversation is intended to be sort of like a second round, a second pass, where we get into some different kinds of issues around transgender and non-binary people. Who could define transgender for me? Anybody? Yes, here.
Someone who identifies as a gender different than what they were assigned at birth.
Awesome. So for those, if anyone didn't hear it, someone who identifies as a gender different than what they were assigned at birth. Who can identify, what's the gender binary?
Do you believe that there is only a male and female and there's nothing in between on the scale?
Sure, yeah. So the binary is really that investment in the idea of male and female as the two genders, right? So what's non-binary mean?
So someone whose gender identity is in between or outside of non-binary.
Awesome, yeah. So basically today we're going to try to bring in transgender and non-binary issues that affect transgender and non-binary people when in supportive housing and in getting supportive housing. So I'm going to introduce each of the panelists as they speak, but let me just start by saying that I want to ground this panel on a couple of things. Did anybody make it to really any of the presentations from Mark Jones earlier today and some of the other panelists? So I hope we can just all bring that into today's panel. And also, let's please end racism as a key component of this work. My other introductory comments are that I hope we can center, that when we talk about transgender and non-binary people, that this work we're going to talk about is about empowering and centering the voices of already empowered transgender and non-binary people. And so I hope that, looking for all the cool notes I made earlier today, I spilled water on my talking points, by the way, so I'm winging it. But I hope that as we have this conversation, we can focus on how to be client-based or client-centered, how we can always work towards empowerment, and earlier, as several panelists spoke about, including Mark, the flat hierarchy or flat decision-making structure, and how we promote in all things, how do we promote self-determination. With that, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, and I'll start with all the way over here with Roslyn.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm just going to ask each panelist, I will introduce you, and then I'm going to ask each panelist to share a little bit about their work and how their organization serves transgender and non-binary people. So Roslyn Campbell from Project Ally, or Accept LGBTQ Youth, at Roslyn is a project manager. Or the project manager. Roslyn has a background in facilitating workshops on HIV prevention and education, CDC, DEBI interventions, interpersonal communication, self-esteem, empowerment, anger management, and creative arts therapy. Ms. Campbell joined Canva's Project Ally in December 2016, coming from SCO Family of Services, where she worked as the independent living specialist for the LGBTQ Youth Group Home Services. Through working with LGBTQ youth in group homes, Ms. Campbell became aware of the overwhelming amount of youth who were either homeless or living in foster care because of their parents' caregivers' inability to accept their sexual orientation or gender identity. Ms. Campbell is a graduate of California State University, Long Beach, and has a BA in psychology. She has also completed graduate-level coursework in drama therapy at NYU and applied theater at CUNY School of Professional Studies. Ms. Campbell is also a drummer in Batala, New York, an all-woman Afro-Brazilian percussion band that's part of a global arts project made up of over 30 bands around the world. Please, Roslyn Campbell.
Oh my God, I sound so fancy. Hi, so Project Ally stands for Project Accept LGBTQ Youth. And essentially, what we do is we provide workshops and resource materials that promote family acceptance. Our workshops are offered to parents, or I like to say adults who are in care of and community with LGBTQ youth. Is there anyone here in the room who is not in care of or in community with an LGBTQ young person? So yeah, that's all of us. Our staff workshops are also for staff development, because in some place and time in our workplaces, if you are working in anywhere in social services, you are going to interface with a family who is having some sort of challenges around acceptance, or a family who knows a family or whose child is friends with an LGBTQ youth whose family is not accepting them, and as a result, that child is staying in their home with them on almost a 24-hour basis. So because these struggles are real, and because family acceptance is something that at the time that I came into working with LGBTQ youth, it was really not even a focal point. What was focused on was the behavior of the child and the behavior of the parent. And there was no really addressing how these behaviors or any of these things were impacted by the fact because your child, his sexual orientation or gender identity is something that they are struggling with, and the parents and the family are struggling to accept it, and they have a household where they are subtly not affirming that. And when I say subtle like, you're watching Pose. That's a great show. One of my kids is the star of that show. I worked with India. And you're watching Pose, and someone in the family says, "Turn that crazy mess off. That's against God." And you have a 12-year-old child sitting in a room with you, and that 12-year-old child is just now starting to question their sexual orientation, or maybe they have been feeling these things since 8 years old, but because of the type of words they hear in their home, they already know from as early as the age of 8 that the way that they feel is something that is demonized and not acceptable. So now we turn to a child who is now exhibiting behaviors since the age of 8 or 9, and the parents are not understanding, and everything is going haywire. And the statistics show that when LGBTQ youth are not accepted by their families, they're actually 8 times as likely to attempt suicide, 6 to 8 times as likely to suffer from depression, and 3 to 5 times as likely to become infected with HIV and AIDS. The studies also show with just a little bit of acceptance, like a little bit of acceptance, it goes a long way. So these children, all they need is just an in that says, okay, you see me, you accept me, you love me, I can be who I am. For our parent advocate, Keisha Costin, she's a parent advocate of our program. That was her situation in her home when her child finally told her after 5 years of really, really bad behavior. I have a role model story. You can read it. She said immediately the behavior turned around, but her husband, her Guyanese Rastafarian husband, was not accepting that in their household. So he wanted the child to go live in Guyana, go live anywhere separate from the other 4 children that they had, because he felt like she was going to infect the other children. So because of those circumstances, this is a woman who's married to this man from high school. What happens is, eventually she had to choose between her child and her husband, and she chose her child. She has a new husband now, and life is great, and her child flourished when she realized that she was accepted. So our program, in addition to providing these awesome workshops, I was told I have 3 minutes. I don't have a sense of time, so you have to excuse me. We also have role model stories, and role model stories are stories about parents who had challenges to accepting their children at first, but they overcame them. And later on, we have a short video vignette of one of our role model stories titled My Daughter Tyler that I'll be able to show. That story we just filmed over last month and are making a feature short out of that. So, we cast it, have actors, it's amazing. And all of our stories, we have 8 stories of different parents who had experiences with their children and those challenges and overcoming them. We have posters that go up every year around Brooklyn, and for the first time this year, we had our posters in all 5 boroughs featuring a family situation where a family is showing acceptance to their LGBTQ child, and with the message of love and support your LGBTQ child. Like, we shouldn't have to say that, but we absolutely positively do. And is there another 30 seconds? Or did I just use up 30 seconds asking if I have 30 seconds? Okay. In addition to the posters that we have and the brochures and the role model stories and the awesome workshop that I have a completely open calendar to do. Like, if you guys are like, can you come tomorrow? I'd be like, no, because I have a health fair, but I can come anytime next week, Monday through Friday. That's open calendar. I have business cards. The workshops are about 90 minutes long. I know I have other time to talk about the workshop, and you guys are going to be like, yeah, we wanted to come. But please, this work is important. And the first part of actually doing the work is actually bringing people in to do the work. We come to these panels and these health fairs, and we network, and we get each other's business cards, and they just become a pile of business cards on the desk. I don't want to be in your pile of business cards. I want to be in your office or working with your staff or working with your parent groups and providing this workshop so we can start really getting into the community and creating affirming environments for these kids, because it matters now. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Really perfect on time, too.
Oh, really?
Okay, so our next panelist is Mildred Ramirez. Mildred currently works at West End Residences, specifically at the True Colors Residence, LP, where she is the program director for True Colors Residence. Mildred provides supportive housing and services to residents living with mental health and supportive substance use conditions that are young adults identifying in the LGBTQIA community. Mildred provides psychotherapy, clinical case management, vocational counseling, referrals, and crisis management to residents. Mildred is an MSW, which specializes in advocacy and in working with those with trauma, substance dependencies, and primarily with LGBTQIA individuals with severe mental health conditions, and helping those individuals achieve goals that may otherwise become difficult in nature due to unaddressed barriers they face, posed by the disability they live with. Mildred has an endless passion for her position and in empowering the LGBTQI community. Exclamation point. Mildred Ramirez.
I don't know where to start like you, but I work at True Colors Residence. So True Colors Residence is, I'll tell you a little history about it. They partnered with Cindy Lauper and her manager, Lisa Barberis, and it's the first permanent housing facility with supportive services for formerly homeless or at-risk LGBTQIA young adults ages 18 to 24. We are actually a supportive housing, and we provide support. We have a clinical case manager. We have myself as an MSW. We have a licensed mental health counselor, and we have a life skills manager. And we just provide life skills and how to navigate for the LGBTQI community, in addition to actually obtaining a residence. So when I do the application, they actually have Section 8. They do have to pay 30% of their income. But it could be a stipend. It's an amazing program because even people who get a stipend, it actually counts as income. So I'll get more into that later. But it's just amazing to be able to work in an organization that acknowledges and respects and was able to do something so extraordinary as to help the LGBTQI community. And to me, it's just like, again, exclamation point. Every day I love to go to my job because it's a career and it's something that needs to be done, and I truly have a passion. And I'll give you a little bit more history because I actually started out as a life skills manager, so I was very hands-on. So we wanted to give the experience to somebody who identifies as LGBTQIA, who's also had a history of trauma or mental illness and substance abuse, to just be what the perception of normal is, to be able to go to a museum, to be able to leave my block and be able to go to a beach. Even though you live in New York City, you never have these experiences. So it's like we have the opportunity through our programming just to be like self-acceptance, and you're part of a community and you count and you matter. And everything is client-centered, so we do what they're looking. What every resident says, well, I want to do this. I want to go. I want to go apple picking. Simple as that. We'll be able to take all our residents apple picking and to give them the experience that it's like it's okay. People shouldn't have to judge you for who you identify or who you love. You're a person. You're an individual, and that's a lot of the feedback that I get, because it's very important. We only have 30 units, so it's 30 apartments, 30 people who live there. But it's a perfect number because 30 people, I know every single person who's there. I know their history. I know their likes and dislikes. Once you get to 50 or more people, it's a little bit more difficult. And we didn't want anybody to fall through the cracks, as they say. Every individual in that facility and that residence counts. And everybody, whatever they're looking for, whatever goal they're trying to attain, our services are there to help them attain those things. The whole thing with True Colors is fantastic because it is a project-based Section 8 building, so the Section 8 is tied to the building, but after a year of residing in True Colors, that tenant has the option to change over that project-based voucher to a housing choice voucher and move anywhere within the United States with a Section 8 voucher. And we're also low-income tax credit program, so we're under 50% to 60% of the median income as well. So everything is in order to be like, let's try and get you to the next phase. Let's try and get you to use that voucher effectively. Let's try to help you to, and it's far-fetched, and you may think not, but somebody might say, well, I want to be the president. I'll sit down and be like, let's see what you need to do to become president. It's okay. Nothing is too far-fetched and nothing is out of reach as long as you have a plan. And we help you to plan. It's not my decision what you want to do, but I'll show you how to get there. And then you can say tomorrow, oh, I don't want to do that. But then there's another option. And we're here to show you that because you identify as LGBTQI or you love somebody different, that doesn't count. You count as an individual. So I'm not going to go over 3 minutes, but it's just an amazing opportunity to work at True Colors and to really make an impact and a difference. Even if it's among 30 people or 60, it's just enriching. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So our third panelist is Nikki Vega, they, them, theirs. Nikki is a queer facilitator with a passion for direct service work. With a background in crisis intervention and social work, Nikki focuses their advocacy efforts on the intersection of human rights and economic justice. They currently work as the TGNC Support Services Coordinator at the LGBT Center in the West Village, where they provide case management services, employment support, service navigation, and programming for TGNC adults. Some of their other responsibilities include providing external TGNC 101 trainings for partnering organizations, as well as supporting the immigration case management and programming at the center. Prior to the center, Nikki worked as an intern at the Ali Forney Center as an intensive case manager, assisting queer, homeless youth get access to resources they need to reduce the harms of homelessness and obtain housing. Nikki Vega.
Hi, everyone. I feel like my bio kind of says exactly what I do at the center, but just to kind of repeat, I provide one-on-one case management and employment support to TGNC adults, so 18 plus. And a lot of my clients overlap with our immigration programming, so TGNC immigrants, some with, some without status. I think, I guess I can say why I'm here at a supportive housing conference. I just recently, in 2019, implemented a supportive the ability for the center to assist clients in applying for supportive housing. So if you know of any TGNC adults, I'm kind of encouraging like places like True Colors and California Center to send me people who might be aging out. But anyone 18 plus, I can help them apply for supportive housing. Housing is a huge issue in New York City alone, and it gets even to be a worse problem for the queer community, and especially the TGNC community, which I'm sure we'll get into. And I think part of my passion also comes from having that lived experience of being a TGNC person who has experienced homelessness in New York City. I think I've had a really lucky experience in that I have a lot of privilege in that I was able to get out of that situation. But it's a very real thing, and I'm very passionate about it. And I don't think I have anything additional to say yet.
Great. So thank you to the panel. We wanted to make sure that there was plenty of opportunity to ask questions, so this will be our first question asking point. Does anyone have anything they want to ask of our panel so far? Please.
Can you just, what is the affiliation with Cyndi Lauper?
Cyndi Lauper, I'll tell you briefly. So Cyndi Lauper was actually a volunteer at West End Residences. West End Residences is a shelter for young ladies 18 to 24 with children under 5 years old. And in addition, they're intergenerational, so they have SROs for 50 seniors. So she would come and volunteer every year. She would do gifts, and she is a very big LGBTQI advocate, and her manager, Lisa Barberis. So they talked with the executive director at the time, Colleen Jackson, and they were like, you know what, there's all of these homeless LGBTQI young adults. What are you doing about it? My executive director did something about it, and she did this fantastic program, and Cyndi Lauper has been there with True Colors helping. And the whole purpose of True Colors is to have a True Colors in every borough and hopefully branch out to every state, because it's something that's needed for at-risk young adults.
Are there any other questions before we move on to the... Yes, would you mind coming to the microphone? Or I could bring...
I wanted to ask, how should a supportive housing site look, and what policies should be in place to be affirming to TGNC communities?
Great question. So the question was, how should supportive housing look, and what policies should be in place to be affirming for TGNC communities? And I'm glad you asked that question, because I think we're going to cover a lot of that in the next few panel conversations. So we'll come back to it, and if we don't answer it before the end, please raise your hand, and I'll know. Okay, one more question? Great, we'll move on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some of the drivers, maybe get grounded in some of the drivers for why TGNC people may experience homelessness or benefit from supportive housing at a disproportionate rate. So studies have shown around 1 in 3 transgender people, as many as 1 in 3, may have been homeless at some point in their lives. And that we all know probably in this room that up to 40% of runaway homeless youth may be LGBT. So I want to start with Nikki and ask, why do transgender and non-binary people in particular experience such high levels of homelessness, and what factors such as racism or disability or other things may come into play there?
Yeah, this is the big question. As the people to my left mentioned who work with youth, a lot of it starts at a very young age. The coming out process can be very difficult for TGNC youth. A lot of family rejection. But even so, for people that come out later in life, they experience employment discrimination. TGNC people are also experience discrimination in the criminal justice system. And all these factors affect our ability to work, and then our ability to make money affects where we live. And then it can get even more complicated not complicated, but it can become, you increase your chances, not just with class and family rejection, but as Elana mentioned, race and disability. A lot of the youth that I worked with at the California Center had comorbidity going on. So they experienced, they had diagnoses that were very stigmatizing. Most of them also had some history with the criminal justice system, and then also had substance use. So it became difficult for them to follow up on tasks, as well as make interviews, and then it also deterred their confidence, and on top of like any kind of discrimination that might happen in those interviews as well, they're dealing with so many things at once. It's not necessarily because they have this one identity celebration really that happens when you come out, but it's everything that happens on top of that. And I don't know if y'all want to add more about what youth experience, but I think that's
sure. Well, we don't mind. So just from a personal experience, I didn't want to come out because it was difficult. Because I was going to lose my family and my housing and lose everything that I loved. It was too difficult. My best friend, on the other hand, did come out. He lost his family. He lost everything. He was a homeless youth. He was couch surfing. He was prostituting. He did what he could. And it was heartbreaking, but I was so scared. So think about it. You're just an individual. I just happen to like people of the same gender as me, and it's like, because this is who you want to identify as, that this is who you love, you're going to lose everything, and you're going to be alone, and you're going to be out there, and it's like, I wasn't even 18, and it's like, what am I going to do? I haven't even gone to school. So I had to shut up. I had to shut up and suffer in silence and live through my friend who was out there and saying, I may be homeless, but I'm proud of who I am. And I had to be in a closet for a long time, until I was like, this closet's getting smaller and smaller, and I can't do it. Because it's either me identifying who I am or like death, because it's not living. So why can't we just accept? I did come out. And my sister just said, I knew all along. I was just waiting for you to tell me. But that's the fear. Because that's the fear that I personally had inside, that it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be like my friend, and I'm going to be homeless, and this is crazy because I love my family with my whole heart. But I don't know, because of our background and religious, visions, if they're going to be accepting of it. Fortunately, I'm one of the ones that did accept it. My best friend, he was taken to conversion therapy, and my best friend actually got into drugs and did everything because he was in pain, and it was hard for him. And eventually, he died at the age of 39 because it was overbearing for him to lose his family. So these are some of the results that I've personally seen, and it is like acceptance is an incredible thing that you can provide to us. Acceptance, and just accepting us as individuals.
Yeah, I think that is a good point that I forgot to mention, in that the coming out doesn't stop the first time you do it. I know for me personally, as a non-binary person, I'm very often correcting people's pronoun usage of me, and that results in a coming out immediately. And it can be awkward in job interviews, or I don't do it when I'm applying for a new apartment because I don't know who the person on the other side of my paperwork, how they feel about this community. And I can only imagine for people who do that on paper, how they, like the statistics are wild in terms of how much TGNC people are discriminated in housing. I'm going to let Roslyn talk in 1 second. But like, that fear for some people, the coming out for some people does get easier, but for some people who may not read as the gender that they want to present at to society, that coming out process doesn't stop ever.
So thank you for your words. This just filled me with words because I'm reflecting on, our cisgendered heteronormative privilege and all of the things that they just spoke about that we never have to think about. One of the things that strikes me that people fail to recognize is how big of a role families play when it comes to LGBT. I just started talking.
You're good. Please continue.
Probably for me.
But in therapeutic environments, the onus is always placed on the individual. This is, we need to work with you on how you deal with this and blah, blah, blah. No one's talking to the family, and no one, except for Project Ally. There you go. We're here. And this is what Project Ally is about. We talk to the community and we say, hey, your child might have a gender identity or a sexual orientation that falls in this spectrum, and they'll know about it as early as 5 years old. And so by the time this child have sophisticated language to even understand how to express that, which usually happens, we got the internet now, so 9. They already understand in their family dynamic that, this isn't going to fly. If I say these things, if I tell my mother and I'm a girl and I like other girls, I'm a boy, I like other boys, I'm only 11. What's going to happen to me? I have to get out of elementary school or wherever you are at 11. And this is what so this creates that stress that we're speaking to, the stress that if it was in Mark Jones's seminar, he spoke to it as well. And these kids at an age where they are even too young to understand how to have a coping mechanism, or what is a healthy coping mechanism, they are dealing with these life or death situations at 11 and 12 years old because they think if they tell mommy or if they tell grandma, I am a girl and I like girls, they're going to be kicked out onto the street because they have a friend that's 13 or 14 years old who is living on the streets. So what do we do? Now, how do we handle that? And we handle that through education. We handle that through learning what it means to be affirming, through learning how to see people as people and to honor people's pronouns and honor their gender identities and sexual orientations and not treat it as an affront to our own identity of who we are or our way of life, as it is talked about currently in this political dynamic. Isn't that crazy? And these kids, again, 9 and 10 years old, trying to figure out where they're going to pack up and go when they come out the closet. As soon as they finish middle school, at least I'll have a chance to get a job at McDonald's. This is the reality. So this is why it is important not to just focus on the LGBTQ plus community, but we also have to focus on our own communities. And when we go to these workshops and these places, we're not just going as people in our professions and go to our jobs to help people. We are also people who live in communities, who have neighbors. We go to the bodegas. We have kids that we see on the train. Every single person can matter to helping a young person not become a statistic that feel like at the age of 39, which is also the age that my very good friend committed suicide. feel like that their life is hopeless because there's no place for them.
This is your time. I wonder if you want to move into the presentation, the film.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Can I say something while Roslyn's grabbing that? Just to like touch on like specific work that I do at the center, and touching on the themes that Elana spoke about, self-determination. I always start with, okay, so you tell me that you're homeless and you don't have anything. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with a job? Do you want to start with housing? And even there, even when they have somebody on their side, when they have organizations supporting them, I think about the trips I've made to HRA for cash assistance or food stamps, and the pronoun issue starts off the conversation already on the wrong foot. I'm thinking about a specific genderqueer person I took to HR to get to apply for cash assistance and food stamps because they couldn't access the online app for different reasons. But they didn't want to say this is the pronoun that I use, and so I came to be like, oh, this person uses they them, and the person was like, she already had something in the system, so you're going to have to start over a new application. It's like, right, that's why they came in person to do it. And then the worker thought I was talking about some person that wasn't there, and so then like, no, she's the one who started it. And I was like, no, they use they, them pronouns, so they are here to finish the application. And it's like, wait, no, she's the one. And we get this back and forth, and the person was like, forget it. I don't even want the money. I just want to leave, and walked out. And then, we had to have a talk about it afterwards. But I can't even imagine if I wasn't there and that, like, forget it. I don't even want this free money that I have access to. I'd rather starve.
Wow. We have a workshop for that.
There's a workshop for that.
There you go. There's a workshop for that.
I want to mention, so Nikki hit on this. So this thing is we have it on the table outside. And it's a guide that El Tantai from the Department of Health and I made. And I recognize Nikki just called out HRA where I work. But please reach out to me when this happens. Please do reach out to me. But this thing right here, number one, please take one. There's like 100 of them outside. The number one item is address people how they want to be addressed. And that's really the root of so many best practices. But then we're going to go back to Roslyn with this presentation.
Okay. Hi. I'm actually so much more comfortable talking and standing up. Talking and sitting down is weird. It feels like this. This is one of our video vignettes. It's from our role model story titled My Daughter Tyler. And the story is about parents. This is a true story based on interviews we did with parents of LGBTQ+ youth who overcame challenges towards accepting their children. What we did was, and part of, again, the importance that is with Project Ally in the workshop is creating a space where we can walk into that space of empathy and really understand, and say, okay, yeah, I get it. So through using media, film, and taking these role model stories and putting them onto film, or having actors come and express them in role, we've been able to kind of reach a different place with sharing these stories and sharing the importance of acceptance. So I'm not going to speak anymore. I'm going to hit play and let you watch Desi Waters in My Daughter Tyler.
Hi, my name is Marie. I'm a happily single mother of two, born and raised in Brownsville, Brooklyn. My mother was from South Carolina. My father's parents were from St. Kitts. Now I live in Williamsburg with one of my children, Tyler. When Tyler was 14 years old, I got a call from his teacher to come to school. When I arrived, I found Tyler wearing a wig and makeup. I stood there in shock, looking for an explanation. when we got home, I asked Tyler, "Why are you dressed like a girl? You're a boy." And Tyler looked at me and said, "I don't know." That scared me. I didn't want Tyler to get, I didn't want him to get hurt. So I told him that for the next year that he could not dress like that. And he began to skip school, and our relationship suffered. On the weekend, I would let Tyler stay at a friend's place in the projects. And one night I got a call from the police saying Tyler had been shot in the arm. And on the way to the hospital, the policeman said, "You know, your child's dressed like a girl." Tyler had been messing with some guy, and when his friends saw them out together, they said, "That's a dude." To save face, he chased and shot Tyler. And that's when things started to change. I was grateful that Tyler was alive. I was grateful that Tyler was alive, and I knew that I had to figure out what this is, or that I could lose my child forever. And I read resources online. I called different support agencies, and I educated myself. And that's when I learned that for transgender people, it's not just about wearing the clothing of the opposite sex. They feel deep down that their gender identity is different from their biological sex at birth. So I went to Tyler and I said, "Is this how you feel?" And Tyler looked at me and said, "Yes, Mommy, I've always known." I had to look into myself. Tyler was not going to change. I had to figure out what this is about. And I had to learn to accept her. And trust me, it's not been easy. You know, she's discriminated against at school and in the streets. And sometimes I have to remind myself that that's who she is. But we talk openly now, and she knows that she's my child, and I will always love and support her.
What did you think? This was the very first public showing of this video vignette, directed by moi. Well, thank you very much. Again, that's actress Desi Waters, who was playing the role of a real-life parent. This was a true story. And I actually got... Did anybody get emotional? Yes. Oh, good. Because this is... it made me emotional just now. And I've read this, and I've seen this video, of course, directed it. And it really hits me here. But this is where it needs to hit people. This is where people need to understand. This is where people need to get past the isms and past what they think the Bible means and past all of those things so that they can feel the love and the emotion and enact the protection that is needed for these children, that they are emboldened to be responsible for. It is their responsibility. It's a parent's job to start by protecting these children. No child should be on the street. And just so it's clear, because I did work at SEL Family Services, I was in the group homes. It's not that these parents are kicking the children out per se, because that's illegal. They can't do that. A lot of these parents are making it so uncomfortable in the homes that they don't feel safe. No child feels safe when every time they go home they get beat or they get cussed out or they get told that they're going to hell because of who they are. So these kids do the best that they can with their coping mechanism to get away from that. Hence they're called runaways, right? Which is really just kind of not a fair misnomer. Because when we think about a runaway kid, we think about some privileged child who's just rejecting, everything that their parents are offering them. They just want to live in the streets and be independent. That's not the case. They're trying to find safety, they're trying to find love, and they're trying to find a place where they can be accepted. And as my parent advocate always said, looking for love in all the wrong places and end up doing something a little strange for a little change for survival. So that's what, I'm glad you enjoyed the film, but that's what, we bring to the table with Project Ally, Accept LGBTQ Youth. 90-minute presentation. You can call me.
Misha?
At the time that Tyler was 14 when her mother discovered she was had a transgender identity. But right now, I think Tyler, the real Tyler's, I think maybe in her late 20s, early 30s, because it was a real story, happened a long time ago. We actually, like I said, we just made a short film out of this story. So in the short film, we have a Tyler, we have the high school, we have all the scenes are played out. So when that is ready, I will find a way to let everybody know.
Do we have other questions before we move into a more specific conversation around supportive housing? Sorry, if you mind stepping to the microphone or speaking very loud.
She'll bring you a microphone.
I need my steps, so sorry I haven't had enough of them already, but I'll move the mic around. It's fine.
I'd love to use this.
Oh, if you want to ask a question.
Okay.
Everyone else.
We can repeat.
We can repeat your
We'll repeat your question.
Okay.
So, some of us can teach acceptance in our homes with our own children. What is being done, and is there anything being done in the school systems so that we can teach acceptance and love and I mean, it's
Excuse my expression.
Can we just repeat the question?
She's asking, she says, we can teach acceptance in the home, but what is being done in our school systems? I had a heavy eye roll because when we have conducted Project Ally workshops, some of our most resistant experiences with people in acceptance has been with school staff in the New York education system. It is no surprise that just 2 years ago, a child was in the news for committing homicide in their school because that child was being bullied. So much so that they had no support and did not feel that they had support from anyone, that they brought a gun to school and shot their classmate. And this happened in the New York Education Department. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the school system. A lot of children, what you teach your children at home, it goes out of the window when they're with their peers at school. They have different personalities when they're with you, and then a whole little monster comes out with some kids when they go to school, and we've seen them on the train. And there's some schools that are doing a good job with trying to create an environment of acceptance. But there's one school in particular in Brooklyn, they are scared. The teachers themselves are scared to be allies to the children because they are afraid of being bullied by the kids, and the administration is not doing anything to help them. So it's a real frustrating situation. We were in the school a couple of months ago doing a workshop with them, trying to fit how do we get to the administration. So part of it is contacting the Department of Education. Jared Fox used to be the LGBTQ liaison in the DOE, but they've got a new person. But there is an LGBTQ liaison. There is a respect for all. Every school has a respect for all person who is supposed to be that person that is knowledgeable about these things. We need to make sure if you are a parent who have a child in a school that you contact the Respect for All liaison, the RFA, and make sure that they're doing their job and they're just not just sitting there and no one knows who they are. Because I've gone to a couple of schools now where I ask, who is our Respect for All liaison? And the answer is, oh, I think it's Cheryl. That shouldn't be the answer. It should be, yes, it's definitely Cheryl. She gave us posters. We had a flyer. We do this thing every month for the kids.
Thank you. So Mildred wants to respond, and Nikki?
Also, in addition to that, because of the school system, what we've done at True Colors is we've become our own advocates. There's a lot of stories that are out there from a lot of our youth and how they were treated and how they were bullied. And what we started doing is we take all our tenants and post to community board meetings, and we get them out there because we need to empower ourselves. Yes, you guys are allies and you are able to do it, but we need a voice. And we need to find that voice within us and say, hey, this happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to anybody else. So yes, you who are here, who are allies and can say something, have children in schools, say something. Say it. We're right with you.
I would also say talk to your local politicians, city council, and Congress people. There are several bills currently sitting on their desks that relate to this issue. It is a state issue and a federal issue. So we have there are bills being pushed through on both levels. Probably not going to be very successful with the federal one, but we can try to push that state bill, which says that anybody working with youth have to have cultural competency training in LGBTQ stuff, generally speaking. And that is something that I believe is totally possible. And so talk to your local politicians.
Thank you. So each of the organizations on our panel today has put a lot of work into how to create spaces that are affirming, and all the individuals here have expertise in that area. So my question, I'm going to start with Mildred about True Colors and about your experience. What does it mean to be affirming for transgender and non-binary people in particular in a supportive housing environment? And can you talk about some of the things that True Colors has done?
Sure. So I'll start from the beginning. All the application process, even I have some applications outside if anybody wants to see them. When I became the program director, I changed it. I said it's not person-centered. So just the idea of saying, oh, what is your gender, and these are the 4 squares that you, or the 2 squares, we changed that. We were just like, leave it and let the person identify as they want to identify and respect it. So that is from the beginning point of doing an application and changing the application. And when I meet individuals and they're coming in, I ask, what is your preferred gender pronoun? No problem. And this is us saying, okay, this is your gender pronoun, no problem. This is who you are, and repeat it and be like, this is how they identify, and respect that. We have an issue sometimes as a cis community that it's like we're binary and we're like, oh, well, it's a boy or a girl, and that's what we're used to. There's plenty more out there, and we just have to unprogram ourselves and understand that there's an expansion, and we're the people are behind, and we're moving forward, and you guys have to incorporate, they, them. Oh, I literally had somebody tell me yesterday, because I came to somebody and I said, this person came to me and they were uncomfortable with how you say this. Their gender pronoun is they or them. Well, this is the response. Well, that's improper English. I said, you're getting paid. You're getting paid and you work in this place and you need to learn acceptance because you're wrong. They stood quiet. All right. A little more about our particular program. We have, it's a small staff, so it's myself, a clinical case manager, and a life skills manager. And we have security, 24-hour security. What we do is, first of all, the idea of security, I kind of changed that because they're house managers, and now I incorporated, every time that I do have to hire somebody, I incorporate questions such as, have you heard of True Colors? Do you know who we service? Are you comfortable working within the LGBTQI community? Let me give you a scenario. This one person lives here, they're transitioning, or they're saying this is a different gender, or they want to be they and them, this is how they self-identify. Are you comfortable with that? I ask these questions because we're providing services for the community, right? And then another thing that I noticed at True Colors is that at first, security was just security, but security, I've changed that name as well. They're actually house managers, and they are definite allies in the community now. Why? Because I've changed the structure. Because it's like, before it was just like the security guards there, whatever, goodbye. No, I incorporated. This is part of staff. They're the first person that young adult is going to go to say, hey, something's going on. My boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other's upstairs and I'm not comfortable. They're going to that person who's downstairs, who's available all the time. So they're incorporated into our staff. And now what I did is I provided cultural competency training so that they are aware of, maybe they weren't exposed because people's backgrounds are limited, but it's like, okay, this is cultural diversity. This is, we brought the gingerbread man and the unicorn and said gender, sexual preference. It's not as easy as it looks, or it's not, as you were taught in school. And they are all still working there, and they've bonded with the community. And I'm like, you guys are allies, significant allies that do not see gender or sexual preference anymore. They see the individual, and they have actual connections. And somebody will I have a guy who is, he's like 30, a very Hispanic, very macho male, and a lot of our trans women love him. They're like, Rolando, I have a boyfriend, I have this, I have that. And it's fantastic to see that people actually became allies in working within True Colors. And this is what we need, people that are accepting. But remember, when I came in, I was like, okay, we're gonna have more diversity. We're gonna, also, there's people with mental health issues, so we have in-house mental health first aid trainings for young adults and for young adults and for adults. Because remember, a lot of our staff that is not, licensed, they're the ones that are the first ones there that are making the connection with the young adults. And believe it or not, they actually can identify with a lot of history that the young adults have gone through. So even with starting there, also, I put some things. So we have, we created a safe space not only for the staff and for the young adults. It's a community, and everybody who comes into our community has respect for each other. Staff, it's interchangeable, but we actually prepared the whole community to be affirming. And even now, we didn't have a lot of gender non-conforming people at first at True Colors. Maybe because I think people now are more comfortable being able to identify and say, yes, I'm gender non-conforming without, having somebody gasp. So we have more people moving in, and we have a list of all the tenants, and we'll ask, what are you comfortable? What are your gender pronouns? And I will go individually to all the staff and be like, listen, I have a new tenant moving in. This is how they identify. Please respect them. And if somebody is unsure, one thing with me is you can always ask. It's not offensive to ask. if you're respectful, and I'm very open about my sexuality, my gender, and everything, and they know as staff that they can come and ask me, and I'm like, you can ask nicely, and it's okay. I'll explain it to you. And I've had people come, and they're now, wow, they, like today I spoke to somebody before I came, and they were just like, yeah, I don't look at anything. If somebody identifies as they or them, I'm looking at the individual, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, this is why we're here. So those are some of the steps that we've taken. If anybody wants to know in particular more, I have a lot more information that I don't have time for, but I'm available.
Thank you. Nikki, do you?
Yeah, I think something that just recently happened at the center, we have gender-neutral bathrooms on 2 floors, public bathrooms, and the 3rd floor was always sex-segregated still. Though underneath it had this little thing that was like, but you can use whatever bathroom you feel comfortable, and there's gender-neutral bathrooms located on 1 and 2. And for a long time, people have been like, just make them all gender-neutral, just make them all gender-neutral. And last week, they've made them all gender-neutral. So it's very exciting. So bathrooms is also a great way to make your space more gender affirming. And I did a training at Workforce One the other day actually, and they were like, we can't change the signs on the bathroom because of some kind of building code. I don't really know. But I was like, but then think about the way you're telling people where the bathroom is. Tell them where both bathrooms are if you have 2 bathrooms, and say, use whatever bathroom you feel comfortable using. Don't assume that people, this person looks like whatever, so I'm going to send them to that bathroom. Point them in the direction of both bathrooms. The culture of pronouns, Mildred touched on that. At the center, the moment that you walk in, there's a bunch of little flyers that say something, a word about words, and it gives people information, like very basics of what is a pronoun, what pronouns are there, how do you ask somebody what their pronoun is, and there's also typically a little box full of pronoun pins or stickers, so that way as soon as you walk into the center, you have the ability to openly identify the pronoun that you use. So if people don't want to go through that conversation of correcting someone or being like saying that's like the first thing that comes out of their mouth about them, we have that. And then I think Mildred also touched on this a little bit about cultural competency trainings and taking an intersectional approach. This is something that the center is slowly starting to incorporate, but that we are strongly encouraging as staff. That, yes, you can have a TGNC 101 training and like learn terminology and learn history, and sure, but TGNC people are whole people and they have other things going on in their lives, and it's important to acknowledge things like race and ability and class and learn more about those things as well, because we all have different experiences and the way people treat us. And I think about this specifically about who the center chooses to take these cultural competency trainings. It's usually people working with community. However, we do have security, we do have custodial staff, and they should be going through these trainings as well, especially because a lot of them do not identify as queer, but they are interacting with TGNC staff, with TGNC community members, and some of the things that I've noticed and that maybe people in supportive housing sites have maybe also noticed is the treatment of maybe non-queer people working in queer communities towards trans women, and how the pure misogyny, it probably, I would say that just because a woman identifies or has a trans experience, it does not exempt her from being treated like women are in society, which is not great. And so incorporating those to all people that work within, under your umbrella, not just people who work one-on-one with clients.
One more thing with us as well, because a person falls into the LGBTQIA category doesn't mean that they are aware or have cultural competency. So I actually just spoke to Roslyn. And maybe what I'm trying to have is have a cultural competency for other tenants. So all of the people in our building identify as LGBTQIA, but it doesn't mean that they're accepting or aware. Okay, this is very important. And we've had situations where I had to step back and be like, well, what? Like, wow, I can't believe it. So we've had in-house trainings, but I'm going to call you later. And then as well as, so everybody identifies as LGBTQIA, but we have a building right by Polo Projects on 155th Street in Harlem. So believe me, I was there before it was built. There was plenty of people who were LGBTQI within the neighborhood before we moved there. But now we got singled out as, the gay building, the HIV building, all different kind of things. So what I did is we started working with organizations. That's why I go to community board meetings with tenants and a resident board. And we started having Love My Block events to emerge our residents. They're part of the community. And it's like you don't want to be ostracized within your house, within your apartment building, and within your community. So we were like, no, we need to immerse ourselves into the community and understand that we're, just like everybody, everybody pays their rent, everybody has a voice here. So it was also outreaching, doing things that would be within the community, and just identifying that, no, we're not the gay building, we're a building of individuals who are fantastic.
Roslyn?
I yield my time. Had to get my Maxine waters on. I definitely agree with everything that is being said here. And this is actually something that we do talk about when we do workshops at Project Ally. One of the bigger issues that I see happening now, particularly in schools, is we have people who want to be accepting. They're like, yes, but how do I do it? Because there's a lot of anxiety around not saying the right thing. And literally, people who are wanting to be allies are in that whole, like, I don't know, okay, I'm just not going to say anything. And they're freaking out. So I'm glad, Mildred, you said if somebody wants to know your pronouns, and Nikki, you also, you go back and forth with this. It's an educational process, but it's okay to ask, especially if you're asking respectfully. I get it wrong sometimes myself. I actually, just moments ago, when speaking to this person whose name is Michelle, because that's what it says on Michelle's name card, I just she said da-da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't give any second thought to the possibility that might not be the pronoun that Michelle goes by. But because I am visually looking at somebody who, in my mind, represents a cisgendered she, just like that, she. And that happens because I'm a human being, and this is how I've been programmed, and it's a natural thing. So we're going to get it wrong. We're going to mess up. We have to give ourselves permission and be a little bit easy and loving with ourselves as we enter into being, accepting and affirming and learning ways to do this. When I started Project Ally, I coming from theater, facilitation, whatever, I'm always in the dressing room. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys. And it's natural, right? We hear that from the circus.
As you do.
I didn't realize until a couple of workshops back that I say folks and y'all now. And someone pointed out, oh, you're from, California. Where do you get saying y'all? And I was like, really? I said y'all? It comes out of my mouth so naturally because I've spent so much time finding ways to address a room without using a gendered pronoun. So that's how you do it, y'all.
That phone ring is not meant to be a microaggression or anything. I can't seem to turn off the ringer.
I yield my time.
Thank you, Roslyn. Thank you, everyone. I also want to, there's a method I like. I like this catchy title. I learned it from the University of Maryland LGBT Center. The catchy title is Share and Invite. So if you share your own pronouns and invite others, it makes it really normalized. It makes it really easy to have that conversation. So I always put my pronouns when I have a tent card like this or a name tag, or I missed it here. But when I'm in a meeting, I ask everyone to do it in a circle. And that sharing and inviting method just creates that. And now I see people doing it. I walk into a meeting and they're already doing it. And I'm like, oh, it's amazing. People are sharing their pronouns. And that just takes some of the pressure off. And the other thing I want to say is, I thank you for what you said, Roslyn, about we all make mistakes. And I think one thing that really helps, just throwing it out there, is practice. And so when we train, we do extensive practicing around pronouns, and we have all these exercises about how to use gender-neutral pronouns and how to refer to someone using affirming pronouns. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to take a moderator's privilege of saying something about trans women for a second, which is that, I don't know if you know this, you probably do if you're here, but trans women are awesome. Have you heard of Stonewall?
Yes.
Trans women brought that to you. Trans women of color. Have you heard of voguing?
Yes.
Trans women of color brought that to you. So trans women and trans women of color are incredibly amazing, and you should do everything you can to support trans women of color. And I mention that because we often hear the truths around the world we live in, which is very racist and very transphobic, is that trans women of color often experience violence, harassment, and are pushed down and ostracized and what's the other word, marginalized, right, for who they are. And so I felt like I couldn't do a panel without mentioning Layleen Polanco Extravaganza. How many have heard of her? Know what I'm talking about when I say Layleen, yeah. So if you don't know, she died on Rikers Island. She's a trans woman from the House of Extravaganza. And she died on Rikers Island. She was there on $500 bail for a misdemeanor, and died under very mysterious circumstances. And so as we remember and think about Layleen, what her family and her community has called for is action. And so, again, I'm not the person, I'm not the spokesperson for that. So I'm going to pass this around. There's a hashtag, Justice for Layleen, and I invite you all to look it up and hear from her community and her family and her close ones and loved ones, and show up to support what she's doing and what they're doing. So as we center trans women of color here, and as we think about how trans women may be in supportive housing and may benefit from creating an affirming environment, we do have some scenarios and things like that, but I wanted to give another chance for people in the room to ask questions of our panel here. Yes, please come to the, it's gone.
I have the mic. I've been waiting to say something.
So this is just a reminder to everyone in this room that when you're talking about like including disability, it needs to be cross disability. Autistic people like myself are more likely to be trans, gender non-conforming, and or queer compared to people who are neurotypical, i.e. non-autistic people. Unfortunately, even in the disability community, there is a hierarchy where at the bottom of it is developmentally and or intellectually disabled people. So I wanted to ask you all, what are you doing or what do you think you could do to support my community as a non-binary autistic person?
That's a great question.
Thank you for the question.
This is something that comes up a lot at the center, actually, asking for specific groups. Because at the LGBT Center, there's a lot of groups that happen, and Wednesdays are our TGNC day for some reason, and all the groups happen then. But there have been a lot of asks for a TGNC group that is specific for people with disabilities. And so this is something that I am personally trying to get the center to follow through on. There is one other group at the center that meets that is not that is not by the center but is center supported, that meets monthly. But to answer your question, I think is actually, what are we doing? Not enough, to put it simply. But I think you make a good point in bringing up the fact that I think supportive housing, but also like community spaces, generally speaking, need to center those folks more.
So for True Colors residents, we actually are a supportive housing, and then we also have different population groups that are within the facility. So we have 18 units for Pop E, which is substance abuse history. Then we also have 5 HUD units and 13 general population units. So each category has its own waiting list, but we do have a licensed mental health counselor to provide services, and we're all licensed and trained within the facility. And remember, it's person-centered, so whatever kind of programming or assistance you need, we will be there to provide it, or at least to connect you with the right organization. Since it's actually housing, but we have housing options. And those 5 HUD units are there, and we have waiting lists, and we have another True Colors in the Bronx, and hopefully 30 more units in Queens and 30 more units in Brooklyn.
And I think just in general, getting to a place where we treat people like the individuals that they are, and not treat the identity or talk to the orientation or the disability or make room for whatever, whatever. Just make room for the person to be, a person, period. End of story. People are people, and everybody deserves to have visibility and acceptance and to be seen, and for their perspective to be understood. We have an intern in our office who is trans autistic, ADHD, and had a very illuminating conversation with him when he was sharing with me what it is that he goes through with being misgendered, and and I kept saying, well, I affirm you, I didn't, I understand, no, and he kept telling me, you're not hearing me, you're not regular people, you're not the people in the real world. In the real world, this is what I am experiencing. And it wasn't enough that I'm sitting here telling him, I affirm you, but I'm like, oh wow. It didn't occur to me that by asserting how much I affirm this person in my position as the program manager of LGBTQ acceptance thing, I am totally ignoring and not hearing him share with me that his world that he has to deal with every day is different, and that people like us who are affirming are an anomaly for him. So it's also very important to just give space and give room and to listen and to be present.
Go ahead, and then I'll...
And then just piggybacking on you, we also have a lot of workshops where we say this is not the norm. Like True Colors is the anomaly, like where you can be that individual, but we will have workshops on coping with real life, coping with once you leave this building and somebody says something inappropriate, what do I do? Mm-hmm. How do I block it out? How to deal with society and ignorance at times. Mm-hmm. So we want to prepare people to be like, okay, it's all safe here and it's fantastic, but not everybody's the same. Within those 5 blocks that you're going to the train, something tragic can happen. But how do you keep it, we do have self-defense classes as well to be like, we live kind of like we are in a weird neighborhood, so be aware of your surroundings,
So I want to also say that in my old job, I worked at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. How many people know Sylvia Rivera? You know that name, the SRLP, and Marsha P. Johnson. If you don't know about them, please immediately, even walk out right now and Google that. I wouldn't be offended. We will have statues of Sylvia and Marsha soon in New York City. Yeah, it's really exciting, right? So at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, one of the things we thought was central to our work was a disability justice framework. and not just disability rights, but thinking about what does justice look like for people with disabilities. And in my mind, similar to what we've been talking about, it's about making sure that our policies and our advocacy are led by people with disabilities. And I want to add that trans advocacy has, especially historically, often been a bit at odds with disability advocacy, in that there sort of used to be a distinction around, well, transgender is not a disability, and rather than looking at like, let's see the ways all people are marginalized by these policies, it was more like, oh, well, transgender is not like that, right? So what SRLP does, and my former employer, not my current employer, SRLP, what they do is they try to challenge that, and they try to create a space for trans people with disabilities to be in leadership and to direct the work. Okay, so we have time for one or two more questions.
Made a decision, like a step backwards, to kind of be discriminatory against transgender individuals within the shelter system. And I was just wondering if you can really speak about maybe some of the organizing or advocacy that might be going into effect to kind of counter that. Again, I work in supportive housing, and I rarely see TGNC people presenting as TGNC people who actually come through for interviews, and I believe a lot of that has to do with the discrimination that they face within the shelter system. I just really wanted to know what you guys, one, felt about that, and also what ways are your organizations or you as an individual trying to kind of counteract that and be more supportive?
Thank you for the question. So I'll just repeat. I'll try to summarize it. That the HUD rules, the new HUD proposed regulations around transgender people in shelter. What kind of organizing is happening around those, and also a question as to sort of like the related question of are trans people discouraged from entering shelter because of the experience of discrimination, and discouraged from entering supportive housing as well because of the experience of discrimination and also the legitimization of that discrimination by the federal government. I'll go to the panel first.
Yeah, working in a setting at AFC where I was trying to get TGNC youth to apply for supportive housing, absolutely, they were discouraged. And I think what are some of the organizing efforts now? I think it's the community and allies need to ask for people that are queer organizations like SRLP, NITAG, who are doing advocacy efforts to put this on their main docket. The center just got some funding to do advocacy work. So if you go to gaycenter.org/advocacy, there's some information about that. And I would encourage, I'm also doing this, encourage people to email the email that you see on there and say, can you put this next on your docket to talk to officials about and to the community about? Right now, the center had been, I will say, supporting the already organized efforts to pass gender, which was successful, as well as the ban on gay conversion therapy. And currently, the focus is on the gay trans panic bill. However, I have a feeling that will pass successfully, and there's going to be an empty docket. And I think this is the perfect opportunity for the center to show up for the community and put this some kind of protections, at least on the state level, for the trans community. So I rarely do this, but if you go to gaycenter.org/advocacy and email that this is something that you want the center to advocate for, I highly recommend you do so.
For us, it hasn't affected us yet because we go through the waiting list, and True Colors is funded, and it's also a low-income tax credit and Section 8 program, so we have some leeway there because of the low-income tax credit guidelines that we're able to impose and apply. So the only thing is, the waiting list and being able to work with DYCD and getting the young adults on the waiting list. because my worry is, where are they going to stay in the meantime while we have transitioned the building? That's my worry. And we're not building True Colors fast enough in the other boroughs to be able to at least home a lot of the young adults. So again, advocacy. We really are big on advocacy for the community, because a lot of the young adults that are now housed know what it is to be out there, know what it is to be homeless, and they don't forget. So it's like, empower that voice and be like, we need advocacy. We connect with different organizations. We go to rallies, as a community.
I think, too, as individual agents of change and allies, what is it that we can do as individuals? There's a simple little thing that we are all able to do once a year in June and I think in November. It usually happens on a Tuesday. Right. I mean, we are not, as people in our communities, taking advantage of what we have in front of us. It shouldn't take a rally. We don't need to get on a bus and go to that place that's north of here. I forget, Albany. I'm from Los Angeles. We just need to be aware and show up at these polls and make our votes count, because these people who are politicians, they're making a lot of decisions that affect the livelihood of people without even understanding anything about the people. Like, they don't know anything about what's going on with our bodies. They're just making decisions based on their assumptions and their isms and their beliefs. So we got to do something, and we got to start with, the very basic thing, doing enough research when we get to the polls, and not just voting our conscience and voting our beliefs, but voting based on our research and what we know about these people who are going to be in charge of making these policies in the first place.
I just want to note, I think it's important to say that the HUD rules do not forbid you from affirming transgender people. The HUD rules, even as proposed, allow for agencies to be affirming, and therefore, please do. Final question.
Hi. Really quickly, Mildred, you had said something about someone who had an issue with they, them. And I wanted to say that during those conversations, I usually remind people that English is a very linguistically, limited language. And it's also very binary, so we're working with what we've got, so work with us. But my question is, for folks that want to go into working with the LGBTQIA community but haven't, is there a workshop that we could take as an office so that everyone can just be on the same page before we enter those spaces? Kind of like Undoing Racism, but for the LGBTQ.
I'm not sure, but
I was going to ask you, but
I've heard of this workshop.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay. So I'm coming to you.
I'm right here.
Okay.
The center also does specific trainings for working with TGNC non-binary people as well.
But just
please.
One more thing. Even with me in particular, just to share with you, I went back to school later, got my bachelor's, and the only reason why I took the job at West End, the only reason is because I was a caseworker in a shelter. And the only reason why I took that job in particular is because when I read about the organization, I read that True Colors was being built. And I got the amazing opportunity to get the job at True Colors. And I just hope that like me, everybody gets the opportunity to work in an environment that is so affirming and so wonderful. And it's a joy for me to go to work every day. And it's a joy for me, even for people who've moved out, to say, hey, you know what? True Colors had an impact on me. That's it.
What wonderful words to end on. Thank you all. Thanks to our panel.
Thank you, Elana.
Thanks, Elana, Nikki, Mildred, Roslyn.
I have stuff here. I have brochures and business cards. I didn't know there was a table outside.
Yes. Mildred and Nikki put information right outside the door, too, if you want to grab some.